What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back, or welcome to Heavy Hitter Media. Today we're going to talk about, is she fat shaming or not? Well, apparently Dr. Sydney Watson took a flight this weekend with American Airlines, and she shared some really interesting tweets mid-flight because she was wedged in between two obese, morbidly obese, as she said, people for a 3-hour flight. She says, "I'm currently literally wedged between two obese people on my flight. Come on back in, let's have this heavy conversation. And I purposely wore my I Heart Heavy Hitter shirt." That's right, come on in, y'all. We're gonna talk about being fat and having to fly. I am obviously a fat man, hence me wearing an I Love Heavy Hitter shirt, which is my shirt you can go to my website, heavyhitterspride.com, and purchase. Again, www.heavyhitterspride.com, and purchase the shirt. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. I am a fat man. I have been, unfortunately, placed in a position of inconveniencing others when the other seat is not available. I am, however, also in the position of being able to purchase the other seat. I am a tall guy, so I need space for my legs. And I'm a big guy. And unfortunately, on some flights, when I can't get into first class, which ain't often, because I ain't often buying a first class seat, let me be honest. But I have purchased business class. And on Southwest, I have been able to get the seat next to me. The seats are pretty affordable. So I've been in that position, so I get what she's saying. I just didn't like how the hell she said it. So let's look at the video and let's talk about it. You ready? Let's get into this shit. Okay, y'all, so let's get started. Let's look at this video. I'm gonna go ahead and get it started. I want y'all to listen to this chick and just take it all in. I'm going to do another video that's going to be the response from American Airlines. So at the end of this video, look for one of these videos in order to follow that. And again, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Y'all enjoy this BS. Peace.
On my own pain. So this video is sponsored by Sheath Underwear. All right, so I can't believe I'm even having to address this. So I was on a flight the other evening from New York to Dallas. And on that flight, I was wedged, quite literally wedged, between two very obese people. And I spent about 3 hours, just over 3 hours, squished like a little sardine between these people, with them encroaching upon my space, with them touching me, sweating on me. Ugh. I had maybe a third of a seat. At best. And in light of that, I rage tweeted the entire flight about the situation with pictures and everything. And it was actually odd because as I was doing this, so many of you seemed to be enjoying it. A lot of you said that it made your night, that it made you laugh. And so I continued to post updates that got progressively funnier and funnier, I suppose, as I was starting to write them with the purpose of making you guys laugh at my pain while I was hating it. Eventually, this led me to a point where I tweeted at American Airlines, because that's who I was flying with, about the situation, and they effectively told me, "Too bad, how sad, go in, F yourself." They said, "Our passengers come in all shapes and sizes. We're sorry you were uncomfortable on your flight." I was not impressed. And honestly, I thought that was the end of it. I said what I needed to say. I got to rage tweet in my private messages to friends. I offloaded significantly. I got a demented response from the airline. A bunch of you got a laugh out of the situation. I got to be my regular Sydney self on the internet during my flight. And I thought, you know, that's that, right? I'm gonna follow up with the airline privately, which I was 1000% prepared and going to do. And if they did say something demented, then, you know, I probably would have shared that with you because I'm like a mama bird spitting information into your baby bird mouths. But I was wrong, and apparently that was not the end of the situation. I don't know why, but apparently this matters to people. So my friend Jeremy from The Quartering made a video about it. Then other people made videos about it as well. Then I started receiving an onslaught of abusive and unhinged messages and comments and emails about the situation, which most of which just, by the way, made me laugh just because they're so crazy. But I was being called fatphobic and told that I'm fat shaming and that I'm a horrible human being. I got called the C word. And as of filming this, the Daily Mail covered this story. In fact, it's presently the front page of their website. It's the first story on their website. And then news.com.au also covered the story and said that I'm fat shaming and, said that I'm offensive. So that's really fun. So you know what? Now I'm going to say something about all of this, because if all of these people get to make a fuss, I also get to make a fuss. You already made a fuss. A bigger fuss. But before we do the fuss, before we get into the fuss, and you once again board my hell gondola and get sandwiched between two people who will sweat on you, let's hear from today's sponsor, Sheath Under. Like I said, I was on a flight the other day, which was just over 3 hours, 3.5 hours long, from New York to Dallas, and I was sat between two extremely obese people, and I tried to take photos of it because I knew that the people on twitter.com would say that I was lying, because that's their natural response to everything. This was the best I could do, and yes, those are arm rolls. In retrospect, I really wish that I'd gotten someone to take a photo of us all sitting in our row, because it would have looked so ridiculous that I point blank would have put that picture on a shirt and then worn it on my next flight. But it was ridiculous. The whole thing was absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I was sardined. I was sandwiched between these two people to the point where I had little T-Rex arms. People were saying to me, how are you texting? How are they not reading your texts? Well, they can't read my texts because my arms are like this, and my hands to hold it, I'm like this, it's this close to my face. So there was absolutely no way for them to read and what I was doing and saying on the internet. It made it quite challenging to take photos of the situation as well. But I was squashed between these two people. No exaggeration. We actually hadn't been on the flight for too long when I turned to the guy to my right and I said, basically, would you be comfortable swapping seats? And he goes, no, that's okay. That's my sister, and we sit together all the time. Which, I feel like if you had any level of self-awareness or just decency in general, your response to that question would have been, yes, of course, let's swap, let's do that. Because it's better for you to be jammed up against, jammed into, squashed into your sister rather than a total stranger squashed into her. I feel like this is common courtesy, but maybe that's just me. So this was just not good from the outset. I was already very distressed from the outset. Those of you who know my plane history, I talked about it a little bit on Blair White's podcast, will know that this was not the best environment for me to be in. It's not fun as a general rule when people have to touch you without your consent. It's not fun when people have to invade your personal space, especially if you have a background where you've had negative experiences with that sort of thing. But anyway, midway through this flight, obviously the drink cart comes along and I get my little cup of tea because yes, I am a psychopath who drinks tea on planes rather than liquor. And at this point, I try to put my tray table down and I physically can't because the woman to my left, her belly is protruding so far that I physically can't get the tray table down. And in fact, in order for me to do so, I would have had to shove it down and, probably hurt her somewhat. I don't know. Can belly, does that feel pain? I'm not exaggerating when I say that I would have had to shove it down to use it. And part of me wanted to. So at this stage, I'm extremely upset. My body is being touched in one way or another. I couldn't get away from strangers touching me because even when I leaned forward, which I eventually did on the flight for a little while, which just by the way, and not to be whiny about this, but on a serious note, that caused me back pain and hip pain, cause woo for having hip surgery. But if I wasn't leaning forward to get my arms away from being squished, my hips were still being pressed together because on either side, both of their bodies and both of their hips, or whatever part of their body was doing this, was pushing mine together. So I'm not exaggerating when I say that I had a third of a seat, a half of a seat. It was just... And at this point as well, I'm feeling bad for the guy sitting in front of me because I'm almost having to rest my head on his seat, which I don't know if he could feel that, but I'm having to do that to, continue to drink tea and try to, rage tweet. And he had his seat back. So every time he would adjust himself or shift in his chair, he's smacking me in the face with his chair. And so at this point, I'm squished, I'm a sardine, and now I'm getting a headache. I can laugh about it now, but at the time I did feel a little humiliated because at this point as well, I'm hungry and I had a sandwich with me. I'm trying to eat the sandwich. I tweeted that I was hunched over like a little orangutan trying to eat my sandwich facing the floor, you know, all bent over and being creepy because I didn't have enough space to physically eat my food either, unless I wanted to eat like this in the same way that I'd been texting. So it was a very humiliating situation. I felt like I was some sort of ground-dwelling animal with back problems that can't properly consume food. It was not my favorite. Anyway, I was sitting in the second to last row on the plane, so when we eventually were able to get off, I did wait to talk to the flight attendants because one in particular had noticed that I was really distressed during the flight and kept asking me if I was okay. I should have asked for free booze. He told me at the end there that he would have given me free booze, and I feel like that was a missed opportunity. But I waited till everyone had gotten off the flight, and I basically said to him, I just wanted to let you know that you checking in with me really did make a big difference because I don't know about the rest of you, but when negative and yucky things are happening or just stuff that's not great, sometimes it can make it a lot better and ameliorate the situation when someone else acknowledges that that thing's happening to you and they express a sense of, you know, sympathy or empathy or whatever for what you're going through, even if it's minor, even if it's, you know, even really ginormous. It makes a big difference, at least to me. So the fact that he did that, I wanted to let him know. And then what that basically did was open the floodgates for the other flight attendants who were also on the plane as well to basically say to me, we're so sorry. And they did. All of them apologized. All of them acknowledged that it was totally messed up what was going on. And they even said that they were trying to find a child who might swap seats with me. And I don't know what kind of parent would sign off on that. Maybe these modern weird ones. But it was a full flight. I understood that there was very little that anybody could do except for buying 2 seats because you know that you're not gonna fit in the ones on the plane. That was the thing that could have happened, that could have saved all of us the pain and suffering and discomfort and unhappiness that ensued. Anyway, the flight attendant's response to the situation was kind of what pacified me a little bit because I think maybe otherwise I would have turned into a demon creature that would have tried to consume the plane from rage. So eventually I did tweet at American Airlines, and those of you who know me and who've been around for a little while, you probably know my sense of humor, and you know that what I wrote was serious, of course, but it was also written in jest as well. It was written in such a way, a lot of what I actually tweeted was written in such a way that I was trying to make light of a situation that had made me very upset. And they responded, like I said, saying that their customers come in all shapes and sizes. They also replied to someone saying that they offer a variety of seat sizes and styles so our customers can select what works best for them. But where? Because when you fly cattle class, the seats are all the same size. And when you fly business class, the seats are also all the same size. So really, you have 2 options on domestic flights. You have cattle class seats and then overpriced business class seats with a little extra room. That's basically, those are the options that you have, American Airlines. I will note at this point that I got a bunch of responses from people about this situation, some of which I agreed with, others not so much. One of which was, oh, why didn't you, Sydney, just buy a business class ticket? Oh, why didn't you just sit in the aisle seat? And I think it's really weird and maybe not such a great position to take that I, the normal sized human being, have to take measures to not be sat between obese people who by rights should have bought another seat or probably not actually flown at all, to be honest with you. Why is it that I have to be the one who accommodates them when they don't make choices that accommodate me? And again, this is just in the flying context. Try not to extrapolate this or, you know, use this in other situations. I'm solely talking about flying here. If anything, they should be the ones that have to buy the business class ticket or the second seat, not me. And then the other component of this is I needed to be on that New York to Dallas flight because it was the only one that got me back to Dallas in time. So I didn't have a lot of options coming out of New York. These tickets were booked a little late in the game. This was for a thing I was doing in New York for Vice. And so, you know, when people go, oh, why didn't you pick an aisle seat? I always opt for the aisle seats. People who like the window, you're very odd to me. I don't get you. But I always opt for the aisle seat. There wasn't any available on this flight, so I picked a middle seat. And honestly, most of the time, middle seats are okay. I fly a little bit. I used to fly a lot more. I fly a little bit these days, and usually it's fine. I've been sat next to the stinky people who they smell bad, and I've been sat next to some weirdos, but by and large, it's okay. And I'm small enough, I think, that I can just sort of slinky into situations without it being too much trouble. So anyway, like I said, I thought the situation was done. Apparently it wasn't. And then these two articles crop up. And this news.com.au article is especially vicious. It says that my comments were offensive and that I was fat shaming. And honestly, I don't really understand why people think that me as a human being wanting my own personal space is the issue here. Sir, please. Also, can I just add that they say that I claim to be an American Australian political commentator, and they call me a doctor because it's in my Twitter handle. Like, what do you mean I claim to be an Australian American political commentator? I am that. But the doctor thing, that you take at face value? What is happening? And they make note of the fact, like it's a negative, that I didn't pay for my ticket. Which I didn't. Vice paid for it, and I'm thankful that they did. That was very kind of them. But just because I didn't pay for my flight this time round doesn't mean that that somehow circumvents how jacked this situation was. So obviously I take issue with a lot of what's being said around this from the other side of the aisle, from this article and whatnot. To call this fat shaming, maybe that's probably true. It probably is. But I don't know why that's a bad thing. I really don't. And when I talk about the obesity epidemic, when I talk about the fat acceptance movement, I don't make a secret of the fact that I don't like this. People should not be as big as they are today. And in the small percentage of cases where it is a medical condition, where it is related to something other than not being able to control what you eat, not going to the gym, being very sedentary, I realize that those people exist and I feel very bad for them because they don't have a lot of control over that, but the vast majority of people do. And the vast majority of people, when they buy a plane ticket, when they buy any sort of ticket, whether traveling or going somewhere where they're being transported, if you will, they must take into consideration the other passengers around them in that capacity, because if you are encroaching upon someone's space, if you are spending an entire flight with another person, crushing them, there's a problem with that. And the icing on the cake in all of this is that airlines, and I didn't know this before, but I know this now, and now all of you know this too, airlines have policies that stop obese people or very overweight people from doing what happened to me. They have policies. Obviously, they change depending on which airline you're flying with. But the majority of them have something in place that basically says, if you are too big, you should probably buy an additional seat. If you are too big, you can't get on the plane. They have these rules in place to stop these very things from happening. And hilariously, when they do and you say, hello, this happened to me, this wasn't okay, their response is actually, eat a bag of pee-pees. In this context, what on earth is the point of having these policies if you're not going to enforce them? The fact that the response to this was to call me a fat shamer, to make me into the bad guy, really speaks to how demented we have gotten as a society, because in this context, I think any regular normal person would have reacted the way that I did, because nobody wants their space encroached upon like this. Nobody wants to be touched like this. It's not okay. It's uncomfortable. It's awful. The problem is that obesity has gotten out of hand, and we try to act like it hasn't. We try to act like all the things that are happening around us are normal, that they're okay, that they're justifiable, but the fact of the matter is that they're not. There's a reason why obesity leads to the multitude of health issues that come along with it. There is a reason why it is extremely challenging to fit into normal size things in society, because being these sizes is not okay. And that might be uncomfortable to hear, that might make you sad to hear, especially if you are someone who is on the heavier side of things, but it is true. And I don't think that we put enough effort and energy into encouraging people to be better and to do better. We just make excuses when they can't. And I think that that is not a good way of going about things. It's not a good way of progressing, and it doesn't actually progress society. It's not making us better. All of this just makes us worse. Defending these situations just makes everything worse, at least in my view. I guess my primary takeaways from all of this is that A, I'm not sorry for what I said. And, you know, anybody who took exception to the way I articulated it, well, sorry, you don't have a sense of humor. And again, I think that the way that I reacted was how the vast majority of the population would react. B, if you are an overweight person and you are considerate of other people, I think you're wonderful, and I think that's very kind of you to do. And thank you for making those choices, because this is how flying becomes less awful. And again, I don't want anybody who does the right thing by others to think this is an attack on them, because it's absolutely not. I am not talking about you. And C, the fact that this is considered fat shaming, or the fact that this is considered offensive and inappropriate, really speaks to how regressive we are as a society. It means that while the left and while all these other groups of people, while these fat positive people are probably the ones crying about consent all the time, they're the ones who complain about choices being taken away from them. Well, I didn't have a choice in the situation that just happened to me. I didn't consent to being touched for hours on end. I didn't consent to having no personal space, to being sweat on, because that was another component of this, is that obviously when you're wedged like that, everyone gets a little sweaty. There's a little bit of body situations happening that are not so great. I didn't consent to any of that, and the fact that I'm somehow the bad guy because I took exception, because I said something, really speaks to how completely deranged we are as a society. Like I said, I'm not sorry. I don't apologize for anything. I'm glad that this situation made some of you laugh. Honestly, the fact that you can find humor in it makes me feel a little bit better. Especially those of you on Twitter while I was tweeting who were responding with your really funny comments. A lot of them were so great. They really tickled me. They made a big difference. But generally, like, just be considerate of other people. Like, it costs you nothing to not be a butthead. Anyway, there you go, guys. There's my situation. I got to have my say finally. And again, I hope this makes you laugh a little bit, because I definitely wasn't laughing at the time, but I definitely see the humor in it now. As for these bloody articles that are coming out, like, I actually still don't know why this is news, but I mean, if it is, let's turn it into an opportunity to talk about people being not considerate of one another on frickin' planes, and maybe the conversation about how obesity is an epidemic that kills more people annually than malnutrition does. Maybe we should talk about that. And if that actually is what comes of this, excellent.